right, you're welcome back. For 4 consecutive days between June the 6th and 10th, 2014, the Nigerian military clamped down on top Nigerian newspapers, citing routine security action in the wake of intelligence reports indicating movement of materials with grave security implication across the country.
Now, the papers include Leadership and Daily Trust newspapers. This latest invasion of Daily Trust newspapers is the second since 2014. And going by the provisions of the Nigerian Constitution, the press is empowered to carry out its duty without interference. Chapter 2, Section 22 states, and I quote, that the press, radio, television, and other agencies of the mass media shall at all times be free to uphold the fundamental objectives contained in this chapter and uphold the responsibility and accountability of the government to the people, end of quote.
And considering this latest clampdown on Daily Trust newspaper, is the press actually free in Nigeria? Well, that's our question, one of the posers for our guest this morning. We're being joined by Lanre Arugundade, Executive Director, International Press Center, joining us via Skype. Good morning to you, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Mike and Ngozi. Good morning.
Yes. Now, there's developments based on, the recent happenings. Is this a stark reminder that the democratic culture has not yet taken root in this part, in Nigeria?
Well, I would say that it's a stark reminder that the military does not seem to have accepted the fact that we're in a democratic environment, and that what the military used to do under military government, they cannot repeat that, in a civilian, democracy. And that also means that the so-called freedom of the press is not there as much as people try to portray it. As a matter of fact, just a few days before this latest invasion, I was having a chat with one of the officials of the Open Society Foundations. They work on press freedom issues around the world. And he was saying that it seems as if, the press in Nigeria is very free. There has been no attack on journalists, and he's hopeful that we'll be able to report the elections, freely. And I was warning him that you don't take things for granted. And then suddenly, Daily Trust was invaded. So for me, it's quite worrisome, and it's not acceptable. I've gone back to Daily Trust. I've read the reports over and over and over again, and I keep asking myself, what exactly, is the issue? And yesterday I took the pain to speak with one of the top executives of Daily Trust, the former executive editor of the newspaper, to ask them about, this issue, the circumstances. And they said that 2 weeks ago, when they were doing reports on how Boko Haram was, making fresh incursions, the military complained that they were not, giving adequate publicity to issues affecting, the military. And then they now came around and did a story that essentially says that our military is prepared and is capable of fighting back. And then suddenly you are descending on that newspaper. It just does not add up. People say, oh, the newspaper published troops movement. Please go and read that story. Go through the infographics. There's nowhere there where they said, oh, troops have been located in this particular city or not. The only reference was where they said, army is expected to launch an offensive, in this area. And for me, the military needs to understand that we both have responsibility. I'm happy that you quoted Section 22 of the Constitution. The military has a responsibility for security, to secure the nation. The media has a responsibility to hold government accountable to the people.
Yeah.
So
but it seems to be, Larry Arugundade, it seems to be a real, tough balancing act, even for the media, to be able to draw the line between what is, expedient in terms of putting out news there and, what may jeopardize national security, because that is what the military is saying on its part, that that reportage was actually, it actually was capable of threatening national security.
Well, that is the military interpretation of it. And I think the newspaper interpretation, obviously, is quite different. They felt that, well, we've been reporting, Boko Haram, and now we want to, assure the public that, our military is capable of doing, something. So I agree with you, it's a delicate, balance. And you would always have this situation, really. And it calls for greater dialogue between the military and the top executives, of the media. But, the media, too, we're not infallible. it's not impossible that occasionally you have a situation whereby you probably, cross a line that, the military would consider a red line. Now, when that happens, the solution is not onslaught on the newspaper. The solution is not, arrest of the journalist. The solution is not laying siege on the newspaper's premises across the country, because you are now killing a fly with a sledgehammer. The solution would be to have further, dialogue, with those, editors, point out these issues, and then watch out whether there will be, a repeat. Because the question would be that, has Daily Trust done something like this, in recent times? Is it a recurring, phenomenon? Because if you read that story again, there were editorials where they complained about the fact that, things were not being done right and things should be done. In that same story, they even published photographs. If you go to page 6 of that particular edition, they published photographs of the Special Motorcycle Squad, of, the military, parading some areas in the northeast. And the source of that photograph was credited to Army headquarters. So what I was saying, so you need to look at it. It's a delicate balance. And of course, one of the things which we advocate at the International Press Center is that journalists need to be conflict, sensitive. We shouldn't jeopardize, our military, but because we have a duty to report, we have a duty to monitor governance. We have a duty to assure the public that our government is doing something. You will likely have occasions where the media reports like this. It's how you respond that is now the issue.
All right, Larry, let's talk about this, because the military has been receiving knocks when it comes to this invasion of media stations, or print as the case may be. Now, when it comes to the ideal engagement, that standard, that benchmark, as far as the democratic standards are concerned, how is the military meant to engage when it finds out that the fourth estate of the realm, one way or the other, must have crossed what you call the red line, one way or the other? How should they really have engaged?
Well, there are two approaches to this. If they feel that, or if they felt that, yes, these had actually crossed the red line, and there are serious issues that warrant, some people have even said that what the journalists did amounted to treason, then you could take legal steps. You could get the Office of the Attorney General to institute an action in court against the newspaper. That had happened before in the history of this country. In the case of, I think Nigerian Tribune, the then NPN government, and the then Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Richard Akijide, instituted, an action against, the newspaper. So you could take legal steps. You could resort to using, the regulatory agencies, in the media. Daily Trust belongs to the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria. Their editors belong to the Nigerian Guild of Editors. These are legitimate institutions where complaints, could be directed. That is one approach. The other, really, is to continue to see the media, and I think that this should be the approach, as an ally in the struggle against Boko Haram. For them to have, a meeting or a chat, whatever you call it, with the top echelons of Daily Trust to say that, well, we appreciate the fact that you want the world there to know what we are doing. But the way you've reported it could also, jeopardize our something, and we would not like to see these kind of things, happening, because this we're going to continue. So for me, if they had told that line, that would have been much more acceptable, really, because we're looking at the psychology of the military and the psychology of the media, and I've given you the background.
Yeah.
And well, before we issued our statement at IPC, I took pains to speak with the editors, and beyond reading the stories, I spoke with one of the former executive editors yesterday on the circumstances. And I've told you that, well, few weeks ago, they were being accused of, promoting Boko Haram, quote and unquote. And then they felt that they have a responsibility to do a package that shows that, our government is capable of fighting back. The photographs that were used in that story were sourced from the Army headquarters.
Okay, so, well, we have to wrap this very quickly, Larry. Now, the call for dialogue by the military with the media, is this some kind of a face-saving, method? Or, how do you think the military really should engage the media as far as the war against insurgency is concerned?
Well, if the army had called for a dialogue with the media, it's very, very welcome. I wouldn't say it's a safe-saving thing. It's the right thing to do. Because like I said, today is daily trust. We never know, tomorrow what would happen. So the dialogue has to be continuous.
Okay.
They need to understand, the psychology of the media. They need to point out areas where, they want media. And in some parts of the world, sometimes it's not even ruled out when, the military gives information to the media and they say, oh, well, we're likely to do this. Don't report this, but you can report this.
Okay.
So I would think
thank you very much.
The dialogue.
Yeah, Larry, sorry, we have to. Sorry, Larry, we have to end it here now. Thank you very much, Larry Arogundade, the Executive Director of the International Press Center. Thank you so much for talking to us on TVC Breakfast. Thank you.